This video is about creating buttons, but before we do that I want to talk about the font units EM and REM. So far we have been using pixels for font margin and padding sizes. Now I want to introduce REM units and M units. These units are relative. EM units are relative to their parent element. REM units are relative to the root element, which is the HTML element. So if we have the following in the body of the HTML page, so if we have two divs, a top div and a bottom div, with two h1 tags in each of the divs, if we give the top div a class of top div and the bottom div a class of bottom div, and set the h1 tags in each of the divs so that one has EM value of 2EM and the other has an REM value of 2REM. So if you look here, the two REM values on the output are the same size because they're relative to the 1EM font size. But the two EM values are different sizes. This is because they relate to the parent div, and the top div is smaller, it's only 1.5 EM, and the bottom div is bigger because its parent, the bottom div, is 3 EM. So now let's get on to talking about buttons. First of all, I'm going to create a div with 3 buttons in. I'm going to give the div a class of container. Now I'm going to do the styling. So far we have done inline block and block, but this is going to be display flex. I'm also going to give it a height of 100 VH. That VH stands for viewport height. You can also have viewport width. The viewport height is the length of the screen from top to bottom, and viewport width is the width across the screen. I have a slide to help you understand display flex. With flex you have the main axis and a cross axis. By default the main axis is row, which is in the horizontal direction, and the cross axis is in the vertical direction. By setting the flex direction from row to column, we can make the main axis in the vertical direction and the cross axis will be in the horizontal direction. Some of the properties used with display flex work on the main axis and some work on the cross axis, so it's important to understand what is the main axis and what is the cross axis. Getting back to our code, this is not quite what we want. What's happened here? By default the button element stretches to the full length of the cross axis, which is not what we want. I can set the flex direction from row to column, so now the cross axis is in the horizontal direction and the button stretches across the horizontal. What I can use is align items. and set it to center. Align items works on the cross axis. Putting it to the center stops the stretching across the screen. Do you think if I put the flex direction to row, it will stretch in the vertical direction like it did before? Well, let's see. No, it doesn't, but it centers the row of buttons. This is because the cross direction now is a column and there is only one button in each of the 3 columns. So let's set the flex direction back to column. We can put another property, justify content, and set it to center. This will center the buttons on the page. There's another property called gap. We can use this to put a gap between the buttons. I'll set it to 2 EM. Our buttons look awful at the moment, but they will look better once we style them. I'm going to put a class on the first button. I'm going to call it BTN. And I'm going to set the styles. Set the padding and border to none. Set the margin to 10 px. Cursor to pointer. This will make when I mouse over the button, it'll appear as a hand pointing. See that? Set the font size to 1 rem and the font weight to bold. I'll set the background color EE. Also set the letter spacing. This is the space between the letters to 1 px. That's it. That looks better. So before I go any further, I'm going to delete this margin 10 px because it's not actually doing anything. Sorry about that. So on to the second button. I'm going to put 2 classes on the second button called BTN and BTN-orange. Then I'm going to style the BTN-orange. Background color is D97706. Give it an orange color. And then set the color of the text to white. On the third button, I'm going to put two classes on it as well. This time it's going to be BTN and BTN green. One 6 A3 4A for the colour, and the text is white again. So you see, by just using a main class and having two other classes with it, you can change the colours. What I would like to do is make the background on the buttons change when I hover over them. So starting with the BTN button, hover, and 9C A3 AF BTN orange, hover, B4 5309. BTN green, hover, one 58003D. So having the buttons change colour when I hover over them makes it clear to the user that they are buttons. So now I'm going to need some more buttons. I'll copy the orange button and the green button. And I'm going to give this a third class, BTN small, and this one a third class, BTN large. I'm going to create the CSS for them. Hopefully you can see the advantage of creating a main BTN class and a BTN orange, BTN green, BTN small and BTN large. You can mix and match your classes to get the size and the colour of the button you want. So now we have some nice buttons, but our buttons don't do anything. For our buttons to do something, we need JavaScript. Let's create another file called script.js. Now in the index.html, just above the closing body tag, I'm going to put script source equals script.js. Now inside the script file, I'm going to use a function. What's a function, you ask? A function is a set of statements that perform a task. I'm going to use the inbuilt function called console log. Next, click on your browser to give it focus and press F12 to get the console up. Then make sure the console tab is selected and it should say it works. If it doesn't, click the refresh on the browser and then it should show it. If so, it means you've proven that the HTML file can see your script.js file. Starting with the first button, I want to put an on-click event on the first button. What's an event, you ask? Events are things that happen in the system you're programming, which the system tells you about so your code can react to them. In our case, we simply want "you clicked" to be displayed in the console when the first button is clicked. So in the index.html file, I'm going to put on the first button on click equals you clicked. And then in the script.js file, I'm going to create the function. So now if I click the button, you clicked. On the next button, I'm going to create a mouse enter event. On this event, when you move the mouse cursor over the button, it will trigger the event. On the index.html file, I'm going to put in this button mouse enter, you entered. And on script.js, I'm going to create another function. So when the mouse goes over the orange button, you entered. On the next button, I'm going to create on mouse leave. This is when you take the mouse away, and I'm just going to put console.log you left. When I mouse over nothing, when I leave, you left. For the next button, I'm going to create the event in a different way. I'm going to create an event listener. To create a listener, I need a way to uniquely identify the button. One way I can do this is to give the button an ID. I'm going to give the button an ID of orange. Then in the script.js file, I'm going to create a reference. I'm going to use the const keyword because once we set the value, it is not going to change. I'm going to use orange as the reference name, and the ID is also called orange. I can console log orange out so you can see what it looks like. Now I'm going to add a listener to it. Even though the orange value is constant and cannot be changed, it does not stop us attaching a listener to it. I'm going to output the uClicked function that we created before. And then when I click on it, uClicked. For the last button, I'm going to give it an ID of green and put both a listener and a mouse over listener on it. So back here, ID equals green, and go to the script. I'll copy this. Control V. Green. Green. Green dot add event listener. Click function. You clicked. Over. Right, try it. Moused over me. You click me. That's it for this video. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, make sure you subscribe for more.